morning, everybody. My name is Walter Conlon. I've been the moderator of this forum basically since Henry VIII broke with the church. And we're going to have we'll have a couple of announcements before we start with the legislators. The first is that what we're going to do is first take questions from the audience, and there's people on or viewing us online who will be sending in written questions, and I'm going to sift those out to get, just give merely mention to those whose questions have already been answered. But then we will reserve time at the end of it for if we have the time for the online people. The second thing is, this is a personal thing on myself. I don't get paid for this job, so I'm going to take an in-kind contribution. We have started a Muscatine committee for the support of Ukraine. So if any of you are interested in this, please talk to me after we're done. All right, and then at this point, what I'm going to do is introduce the legislators. We got, going from left to right, Mark Cisneros, representative. Zach Walls is a state senator. Bobby Kaufman, representative. Mark Lofgren, senator, former representative, and David Kerr, representative. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have the legislators, going presumably from left to right, give their summary of what's going on here. After which we will take questions. Please keep your question to 1 minute. Don't give any speeches. Just ask your question. Then finally, no follow-up questions unless we have time at the end, because I want to give everybody a chance to ask one question before somebody, in effect, takes two. So, Representative Cisneros, we'll start with you.
Thank you, sir. First of all, thank you for letting me represent you in Des Moines. It's been a great honor and a big learning experience. I can say that I am proud of the work we've done so far, both last year and this year. And I think there's still some important things we can get done here in the next month or so. And I'll just, with the time that I have here, how much time do we have, Walter?
Try to keep it short. We only have 1 hour total.
Okay. Well, I don't talk that much anyway. HF 2545 is something that I'd like to keep on your radar as we go forward here in the next couple of weeks, and that is Medical Privacy and Freedom Bill. It is something that I have heard from people across the state and, of course, locally. There are concerns of the discrimination that has happened over the last 2 years, people being coerced into deciding whether or not they can continue doing their work. And so we hope to address that. Basically trying to put things back to where they were before someone could ask you what your medical history is. So we want to make sure that medical information stays private and that none of that is used against you in any place, whether it's a business, a store, in way of asking for vaccination passports and those kinds of things. So that's an important issue to me that I hope we can address before we leave session. Thank you.
Senator Walls.
Well, thank you very much, Walter. It's nice to see everyone this morning. First, since the last MCC forum, we've obviously seen the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, so I just want to echo my support for the Ukrainian committee that the team put together. And say that our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Ukraine who are fighting for freedom, for democracy, against a godless, evil tyrant in Vladimir Putin. Second, Representative Cisneros alluded to this a little bit as we kind of, I think, entering hopefully hopefully the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. I say that, but now I've probably jinxed it. The role that the state government is playing in addressing the pandemic is largely coming to an end. The governor, just a few weeks ago, ended the ongoing public health emergency declaration that had created a lot of regulatory relief. We are actually, as a state legislature, now codifying some of that relief, including, I know, some of our schools really depended on some of the loosening of the restrictions around paraeducators and substitute teachers. And so we're working to try and make sure that we're giving our school districts the flexibility that they need as we continue to see some staff shortages that are out there. But I think we're all really glad to see hopefully the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. One major bill that passed recently, I'm sure there'll be some conversation this morning, is a tax bill. There were some different views on how the state should be approaching the very large surplus that we had, which is a combination of state dollars and federal dollars. Republicans and Democrats, I think, both agree that we want a middle-class tax relief, and that's something that Democrats and Republicans both voted for. There was a disagreement about what the top rate should be and where that should kick in. So I know that we'll probably have some conversation this morning about flat tax versus kind of marginal rates. One thing I know that is on a lot of legislators' minds is rising prices. We all see it. There are concerns about it everywhere. There are different kind of perspectives on what's causing that inflation. Some folks think it's a lot of the government spending that we've seen at the federal level. Some folks say it's large corporations taking advantage of the pandemic to raise prices. I'm not an economist, and so I'll leave the prognostication for the economists, but what we do know is that corporate America recorded record profits last year, which I thought was something that just raised my eyebrows as I was looking at everything. The last big piece that we have ahead of us as a legislature, we're still doing some policy bills, so we recently got through the major first funnel, which is one of our first legislative deadlines. The kind of biggest piece of work, in addition to some of the policy work that we're still working on, is the budget. My hope certainly is that we'll be able to get budget done relatively soon. I think the revenue estimating conference meets in, a week and a half, and we'll have our final budget numbers at that point, and hopefully we'll be able to hammer that out and wrap up the session so we can get home. So that's kind of the quick preview of where we've been and what's going on and what's next. So I'll turn it over to Bobby.
Representative Kaufman.
Well, thank you all for being here. Filling up the room on what is going to be a 70-degree Saturday is much appreciated, and I know that Fred Grunder's happy to have this in his hometown finally. Been pushing for this for years. I'm more interested in your questions, so I'll be brief. We are planning on doing a resolution on, I believe, either Monday or Tuesday that I believe will get most everyone's vote, which is that the state of Iowa government will officially stand in solidarity with Ukraine. I can tell you that I'm absolutely in admiration of the Ukrainian president, who, as we speak, is literally holding an assault rifle, fighting among his fellow comrades against Putin. I say this at every forum, and I'm not going to stop. If our local newspapers do a really good job of covering things, statewide, not so much. I'll read an article about what happened on the floor yesterday, and I'll be like, I was there. That's not really even close to what happened. And so I just want to say that despite what you hear, the Republican trifecta is continuing its fifth straight year of over 90% of the bills that become law being overwhelmingly bipartisan. So despite what you hear, we of course disagree on some of the big things, but we continue to work together every single day. And as Zach referred to, the budget's coming up, so I look forward to all your questions. Thank you.
Senator Lofgren.
Thanks for being here, letting me be here. I always call this the land of Kaufman, but here it will, so of course. But I wanted to mention that my district changed because I did have half of what was in Scott County, which was Ross Posh's area, then in Muscatine, Cisneros area. And so now probably 60% different. So I have Muscatine, I have Wilton, and then I go all the way down to Burlington. I don't have the city of Burlington or West Burlington, but I have all the rural area, all of Louisa. I go almost to Mount Pleasant now, and I have a lot of Henry County, so it's a very, very rural area. So it changed quite a bit. So that will be after this year. I am one of those fortunate ones that I don't run for 2 years. So because I ran, over a year ago. So, but I'm the chair of Veterans Affairs. Actually, I got that position just before session started, so I've enjoyed that. We've got different bills. I'm on local government. I'm the vice chair of appropriations, government oversight, human resources, economic growth. But it's some of the bills that I've been working on. We have a bill, so physicals for school physicals to be done by chiropractors. That's like a big thing, but like I said, we hope to get that done. Hands-free driving is very important to me. I'm a runner, and it's very dangerous for runners or cyclists out there on the roads, and I hope that we'll get that done this time. Land banks is something where there's a lot of abandoned, dilapidated properties out there, and it's something I've worked on a long time, and so that's a bill that I hope to get through. Housing is an issue that I care deeply about. It used to be we talked about jobs were the most important thing, which I would say they still are, but if you don't have housing, it's very hard to hire people. So, but the governor originally had a projection of 47,000 units needed by 2030, but now they've raised it to 60,000, and 40% of our housing units in the state were built before 1950. So we have a lot of properties are older properties. And then I am working on kind of one project, as far as, the blood centers have, very, I guess they're not, the demand's very high, but, it's high and everything, but supply's way down. Now with the pandemic, people are at their houses now. A lot of them work at their houses, so they're not working from maybe their normal office. So what's happening is these blood drives, aren't as strong as they had been, so that's something that I'm working on to see what we can figure out what to give to the different blood centers. There's Impact Life is our area, and the Life Serve up in the Des Moines area. So those are just a few things that I'm working on.
Representative Kerr.
Well, good morning to everyone. I finally also made it up here to Milton to the meeting. Representative Sands was had the district that I serve now. Prior to that, and he always came up, he told me. I think these gentlemen covered what's going on in the House and Senate fairly well. I'm the chair of the House Education Appropriations Committee. This year, for the first time, it is the money I have targeted to spend is $1 billion. It's not ever been over $1 billion, but this year is $1 billion, $4 million, and I'll just call the rest change. So it's a large budget. It increases. The Department of Human Services is a budget that is over $2 billion in here in the state. I'll just tell you what kind of dollar numbers that we deal with. In that budget, I deal with the regions, universities, the three regions. We deal with Naomi's favorite subject, community colleges, and fund them. Early childhood Iowa is in my budget. I have 75 line items of requests for money in my budget, and that grows every year. More requests, more requests. And it's getting to be a challenge to meet everybody's request. You just have to, once in a while, say, no, I can't fund you this year, but we'll always look at you again next year. So that's the budget process is just getting started. I've got some numbers penciled in, but they're not down permanent yet. So the process for everyone in the House, anyhow, has started. The Senate, I'm not sure they have their numbers yet to put their budgets together. But I'll be busy the rest of the session running a few bills through public safety and working on budget. So that's what my time will be spent on the rest of the legislative session.
Okay, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, Dan Clark, and we'll take you with more or less in the order that I catch you.
This is a short message from Roma Tikanyenko. Before Walter chaired these things, we had Marlon Sheepers. Some people remember. Spring semester 1995, this young man high school student from Russia, from our Muscatine sister school, lived with Marlon and Marianne Sheepers. They consider him a son. Keep in touch. Roma has been very successful. He lives in Moscow now. He's the CEO of AIG Insurance Russia, the entire country. He has a recent LinkedIn post with a Ukrainian flag, and he writes, "I was born and always lived in Russia. I do have a significant part of Ukrainian blood in me, but never really distinguished the difference. I traveled to Ukraine on many occasions and love the country. I always felt there as home as well, much closer to home than in Moscow, as I'm originally from the Stavropol region, where even accent sounds Ukrainian. It's a disaster. It feels like I cannot awake from the worst dream of my life. Innocent people are dying from both sides because of ambitions of a bunch of people. If only I knew how to change this." He has just under 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. He has many comments on this, people praising him for bravery, and he says, "I'm just doing what I can." I sent him a private email and said, "So is it okay if I share these messages?" And he says, "That's great." This is a brave guy, and he represents many other brave people. Yesterday, Iowa Sister States put out a notice that they have ended our 35-year partnership with the Stavropol region, where Roma comes from. I've been there a number of times myself. I'm the coordinator for Muscatine's relationship with our sister city, Kislovodsk. The advice from Sister Cities International is this is the worst time to cut off people-to-people relationships. Iowa Sister States is public-private, it's citizen diplomacy, it's nonpartisan. I'm begging you, as we support the people struggling for freedom in Ukraine, don't join bandwagons to showboat about cutting off precious relationships with Russian people. Thank you.
Why don't we start with Representative Herr, comment?
I think that's very important that we take that attitude or that position, as you just mentioned, not to cut off what we do. And probably, I think, mentioned that the resolution is going through the House, and it's much needed. Just a bad situation over there, it really is. So I hope they put up a good fight and send Putin running back to Russia.
I was fortunate in the House. I was the chair of international relations for 2 years, which was between the Senate but also the House. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, the relationships are really important. I mean, boy, the year that I was the chair for those years, we had that's back when China had everybody coming in and everything. So it's really important. I mean, I think you have to communicate. These countries have to communicate between themselves. So I think it is important.
Yeah, Daniel, none of us have done that or are doing that. In fact, I started opening comments by talking about how we intend to pass resolution standing with Ukraine. So none of us have voted on any of that or support any of what he just said. We would have your position as well. So thank you.
Daniel, just so I understand correctly, you're saying that there was the sister city relationship to a Russian city was what was ended. Is that right?
No, I'm talking, well, no, sister cities some sister cities around the country are doing this by orders of city councils or whatever. The advice from Sister Cities International is don't do that.
Yeah.
Muscatine has not done that.
What,
I'm talking about the state of Iowa and the Stavropol sister state relationship, which, has Terry Branstad suggested punishing our China relationship for some reason? Just asking.
No one suggested any of this, just FYI.
The Des Moines Legislature reported last week that the governor ordered sister states to end this relationship. Her actual news release says she calls on them, and the board met, and their announcement says that they ended it.
what I would say just briefly, I think you raised an important point, and the LinkedIn post illustrates it, which is that there are a lot of Russian people who acknowledge that what is happening is wrong and are willing to speak out against it, which takes tremendous courage in that country where criticizing the president can be punishable by up to 15 years of jail time, where 8,000 Russians have been arrested by their government for protesting against the war. And so that's something that I think that we need to maintain a memory here, or an awareness here, that there are a lot of Russian people who are against this war. And I think that you're right, the people-to-people relationship is really important. I know that we have sister cities relationships with Ukrainian cities and states, and I understand the want to sever a relationship on a sister city or sister state level with Russian communities, given where we are at this time. But I would share your concern that people-to-people democracy, diplomacy is more important now than ever.
The governor needs good advice.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say, I know that there's a resolution in the House, there's a similar one in the Senate that I believe will have nearly everyone, and I think that we're going to run that either on Monday or Tuesday.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I don't have too much to add other than I would agree that it's important that we maintain those relationships with our friends in other parts of the world. I'm not particularly familiar with the group that you mentioned, but yeah, nothing else to add. I would agree with the rest of my colleagues here.
This gentleman, followed by G.
I'm Joe Burnett, I'm the superintendent between Wilton and Durant. My question comes down to the vouchers. Governor Reynolds every year keeps bringing up and bringing up. And I'm curious where each of you stand on the voucher system that she is proposing, number one. Number two, this is just a small comment as someone that's been in education my entire career. We've seen the private schools have a lot of advantages that public schools do not have. When you're at the state basketball tournament this week, take note. Okay. Number two, if the public schools, how do I say this, are not qualified or good enough in certain legislators or the governor's eyes, you know who's responsible and oversees the public school system? The Department of Ed. You know, oversees the Department of Ed? The governor. So if there's things that need to be improved in public education, the governor and the legislature holds the keys. And so if anyone argues that public education is not good enough, who's responsible for public education? The people that are saying that it's not good enough. So it's very frustrating on our end, as it seems as if we're being looked down upon as public educators. Anyone that's been around education and knows any of it, the public school versus a private school, the rules are vastly different. And to try to support a system that doesn't follow the same rules, that has a lot of built-in advantages, I think is disingenuous. So I'm curious where each of you are on the voucher system that Governor Reynolds is proposing. And my question is, why does this keep coming up every year if it gets overwhelmingly shot down? Where's that coming from?
Why don't we start here?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Joe Burnett,
Joe.
2 T's. That's what I tell people when they threaten to sue me at school.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Brent. My position on education is this, and I'll try to address your complete question, but I believe that the money that we collect from taxes should go to the choice of that parent on how they plan on using their money to educate their child. So specifically to the governor's addressing this particular issue, I would hope that she would expand this to more people. Right now, it's only for a small group of people, of families that would be able to take advantage of this. So I would like to see it expanded.
Senator Walsh.
I oppose vouchers, period.
Simple enough.
I mean, I don't think it's a complicated issue.
So I'm usually the one that's succinct like that, and I'm going to be a little bit longer because I want to provide. I've had such interesting conversations from people on both sides of this, and Joe, you know that the entire program is something I have opposed for years, particularly because of the fact that our schools, I'm extremely biased towards House District 73. That's just, I don't ever have any shame in that. And our schools in House District 73 are phenomenal. Wilton schools, I've got 2 family members teaching there. I have 7 public school teachers in my immediate family. Wilton, Durant, West Branch, Tipton, Bennett, and Solon schools are absolutely phenomenal. And so for that reason, I've always been opposed to vouchers. That being said, there has also, you and I have had these conversations, and you just kind of hit the nail on the head with how to potentially fix it, is you've had some very large urban schools, particularly in the Des Moines area, that have not been acting in good faith, and frankly have been openly flippant towards the legislature and towards our laws. So I sense the frustration of parents in those schools that wish to have options that they don't currently. The governor's proposal is different this year than most. It's a lot narrower. But anything that harms our potential small schools such as Wilton, I have always been completely opposed to. And by the way, while you're here, I just want to say thank you. Your bill passed the Senate and the House last week. I believe we conformed to it. So we will be sending a bill down to the governor's office that if you're a retired teacher and somebody's trying to bring you back, if Joe's trying to bring you back to teach because they couldn't fill in a position, then you would be penalized if you're making more than $30,000 and would jeopardize your IPER status. Well, nobody that's been teaching at a high salary level and is enjoying golfing and playing golf in retirement is going to participate in a coming back to work situation for $25,000, for instance. So to show you that the legislature does work when suggestions are brought to us, Joe asked that we increase that threshold to $50,000 so that a teacher could come back and teach while you're trying to fill a position with an obvious shortage in teachers. And so that bill, I believe, is going to become law, and that started right here with a phone conversation between you and I.
Well, thank you.
Senator Wofford?
I support vouchers, and my wife was in education 33 years, so She's now my clerk at the Capitol, so, and we've had a lot of conversations, that's what we talked about. I have kids that are educators, and son-in-law is an educator and everything else, but I still support vouchers. I do prefer the bill that was done last year with the low-performing schools. I would really rather see that approach actually, but but like I said, that bill's still being worked on. In fact, it's gonna change a lot, I'm sure, over time. So, but again, I'm not really sure where it's at for sure if it's gonna pass, but I think that, like I said, the version will be a lot different than it is right now.
Representative Kirk?
I really like the governor's new plan for 5,000 children, students, above a certain, or qualify under a certain federal poverty level, up to, I think it's 400 times the percent of federal poverty level are included. But what I really think is best about it is for the IEP students, and that's for the individual education by students that have that. It gives them a chance to do things maybe they couldn't always do, and have funding for parents. Let's say parents have an option with these two programs to give their child a different attitude or a different sense of accomplishment, because they have a chance now to get an education that they aren't getting, moreover, possibly in the public schools. And I'm not knocking public schools. Do I think this program will hurt rural schools? No. My district, Wapalos, Mediapolis, Commerce Junction, I do not see. I've talked to some superintendents, and they have concerns. They do. But I don't believe either program of these for only 5,000 students in the state of Iowa. That is less than 2%. What is there, 500,000, 480-some thousand students in the state of Iowa. And this takes 10,000. And then it takes per pupil, say it's 7,400 that the state provides for the students to go to school. And it peels off 5,000, 200 to 300 of that program. The rest will go into a program for schools that are under 500 to help them stay sustainable. The regular school district will get to keep the remainder of that money. One thing about this that nobody seems to talk about is the federal dollars. There's a lot of federal dollars, if I'm not wrong, that for the students in your district or your school system, right?
The majority of our money comes from the state.
But but a lot comes from the federal too, that's applied.
Not really.
Well, you're hearing a different story than I'm hearing then.
We're under 1%.
Pardon me?
Our federal funding is minimal
Okay,
with the title funding and whatnot.
I see. Well, that'll stay at the school level, at the district the child would leave from.
As long as private schools have the same rules as public schools. Okay, what you're saying is that a student could take, a parent has a choice to go to a different school. You realize that private schools can deny anyone they want to.
Not under this new plan, the IEPs they have to take.
But they can put caps on the private schools and whatnot. We take everyone. We don't care where they're at educationally, we don't care where they're at socioeconomically. Private schools pick and choose who they want. And under this bill, from the way I read it, it's like open enrollment. I could apply to go to Davenport Assumption. Davenport Assumption can say to me, you know what, we're full, or we don't think you fit into our program. That is inherently unfair. Okay, I believe parents do need a choice, and that's why there's an open enrollment system in the state of Iowa. If a student in Wilton doesn't feel like they're fitting in here, they can go to Muscatine, they can go to Grant, they can go to West Liberty. But to fund private schools that don't have the same rules, that can pick and choose who they take, I don't know how anybody can say with good faith that is fair.
I don't want to say it, it's under this, if they have an IEP program, the way it was explained to me.
But if they don't, right now, Davenport Assumption, for example, they don't have special ed programming. Those kids stay in public schools.
Yep.
Iowa City, Regina, they don't have special ed programming. So guess where they go? They go to the public schools.
That's why they won't be able to leave. This will not affect every school in the state of Iowa. It will only affect the ones, Burlington, Notre Dame in our area, they're able to take a few more students, but they're at their capacity too. It's not going to affect every parochial school or every rural school district in the state of Iowa. It will probably affect more of the, maybe, Iowa City School District, or it might affect Des Moines public schools a little bit more. Waterloo, Cedar Rapids possibly. That's
My
where I
ask
see
is
this
this apples
moving.
to apples. If the standards apply for the public schools, they better apply for private. And right now, that is not the case.
Right now, I agree with you on that, but I
And
believe.
make sure that your private friends know that that is going to be the case, because they do a lot of things that we're required, they don't do a lot of things we're required to do.
And I could go on about misconceptions on this.
But you won't.
I won't.
Joe, well, I had a very short answer, so I might add a little bit additional context. Joe, I appreciate you bringing the question forward. You and I don't agree on every issue. I know that we don't even agree on every education issue. But I think that you just did an excellent job laying out why the vouchers program should raise concerns for so many people across this state. And by the way, Representative Kerr's right. If we do move forward with the vouchers program, a lot of the biggest beneficiaries will be in urban communities like Iowa City and Des Moines. That's a fact. How many people have open enrolled from Davenport to your district since we changed the rules last year on diversity plans?
Very few here, but next door, almost 60.
Okay. A lot of those kids probably, maybe not all, but a lot of them are probably going to be staying in Davenport, going to a private school if they can get a voucher. Think that's a fair assumption?
Now, because it's on the west side of the Davenport district, the
So-
Walcott area and Bluegrass area.
So
We don't
it'll be-
get we don't get the urban Davenport students, we get the rural western stuff.
Okay,
That's
fair,
Bridges, like-
okay, fair enough. My point is, you are going to see, it may not be immediate, but you are definitely going to see impacts across the state, and it's going to, my guess is, you're going to see a lot of folks, to your point, Joe, a lot of these private schools are already well established in primarily urban communities. And so if you start opening this program up, you're going to see more transfers into those programs, and it's going to make it harder for you to do your job. So I got really grave concerns about the program. I think you did a good job laying out what some of those concerns are. I don't know if we're going to do this. We passed I should be clear, the Republican majority passed a bill out of the Senate last year on the vouchers plan that didn't go anywhere in the House. The governor's back with the new plan, the new vouchers plan this year. It's not totally clear to me whether or not the votes are there in the House. I think we're doing the governor's plan in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate on Wednesday of this week. So it'll be, again, it's going to be a live round coming out of the Senate, and it's going to be up to House Republicans basically to decide whether or not this goes. When we did the bill last year, every Democrat voted against it, and Mark, help me out, 1 or 2 Republicans, or was it a party line vote? I don't remember.
I think it's a party line vote, I believe, but I'm not sure.
So in the House, there's been bipartisan opposition to it up to this point, but we'll see whether or not they can get the 51.
Gene Clark, you have a question?
I do have a question, but first I want to comment. I was the curricular leader of the special education department at Muscatine High School for about 20 years. And I have a sister who teaches at a private parochial school. Yes, they may have some IEP students at the parochial school, but they do not have to provide any services. So it's not a level playing field. The public school has to provide services. And so if a kid's disability is mild, they may go to a private school because they think they can get through without any extra help. A kid with severe challenges, you know what? They're not getting funding, and so they do not transfer to the private school because they're not going to get services. And so keep that in mind. You are cutting off access for some IEP kids. Your bill isn't helping them at all. And it is hurting public schools. My question, though, is I am also involved in the League of Women Voters, and I am very concerned about access to the ballot. Recent laws that you guys have passed have limited counties in their ability to have safe and secure ballot boxes. People can vote through the mail, and they can vote in person, and they can vote going to the auditor's office during business hours. But almost all of the counties in Iowa no longer meet your requirements for having a safe drop box for a ballot. I don't think the mail only because of mail service is appropriate. I had a rent check from a renter take over 2 weeks to get to our house. Don't know why, but you know, that can happen with ballots, so I don't think saying that the mail is a safe and secure, and because of the timelines that you have, it's no longer based on when it was postmarked, it's based on when it's received. So I think you guys, I don't know what you're gonna do funding-wise to be sure that counties have some place that meets the criteria that you have set up for a safe drop box for ballots. Thank you.
So I'll start because I'm the one that wrote that bill. And your question was narrowly tailored, Gene, so I'll address that. But the talking points I've heard about the League of Women Voters database and then subsequent blast emails, inaccurate would be me being nice, and completely false would be me being less nice. The characterizations of our voting laws and what we passed are malpractice of journalism in terms of its coverage. I wrote the bill. I passed the bill. And when I read the stories the next day, if one of my 7 K-12 public educator, teacher, family members would have graded them for accuracy, they would have gotten a big fat F. 492. 492. That's how many hours Iowans have to early vote. 492. It's a fact. Not up for debate. Not, well, I see it this way. It's a fact. Do you know what states have less time than Iowa to early vote? New York, Vermont, and Delaware. The home of Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Chuck Schumer are not the home of voter suppression. Somehow, Gene, with all due respect, before the 2020 election, since 1776, we somehow conducted elections without drop boxes. This notion that not having a drop box in every corner supermarket like they did in Johnson County, with all due respect to Travis
I
Weipert.
think we only had a couple, to be fair.
One,
But one of them was the grocery store.
one per county, please.
Yes, and like I said, we somehow survived every single other election without them. We have 492 hours of early voting. You can vote early in person, and this is the first I'm hearing from a Democrat activist distrusting absentee ballot mail-in voting, but I'll just leave that to your opinion. Counties can have one drop box. They can easily figure this out. I've talked to all my auditors, they're gonna figure this out just fine. And any notion that any of the Republican bills suppressing votes is A, inaccurate, B, misleading, and C, false.
Gene, can I make sure that I understood your question clearly? You're asking specifically, what is the legislature doing to fund counties so that they can maintain at least one drop box per county? Is that right?
Yes, that's my question.
Is that, what, is there a line item for that somewhere?
We allow for one drop box. County
So-
auditors can do what they want.
You allow for it, but it has to have surveillance 24/7,
Absolutely.
and so counties are saying, we can't afford it.
So do you-
Muscatine County has said, we don't have a spot. It has to be attached to the county auditor's office, and it has to have 24/7.
Got it.
The place they have had does not meet the requirements, and so I want to know, what are you going to do to help counties who have strapped budgets
Got it.
Got
to
it.
maintain
So Gene, you're-
one drop box per
So
county?
Gene, your concern is that it's an unfunded mandate from Des Moines that county governments don't feel like they can pay for or what have you.
Yes.
You know, look, democracy is like the most important thing, so like I would say that county governments should figure it out and figure out a way to do that. I mean, I would support state funding if we're gonna put that requirement. If Des Moines is gonna put that requirement in law, then Des Moines should probably provide some funding to make it possible. From a big picture perspective, to Representative Kaufman's points, look, we all want trust in our elections. It's the basis of the lowercase d democratic process, right? And I think that some of the disagreements out there about how much fraud there is in our election system, and I'd say some of the rhetoric, Bobby, from my side is not helpful on this. There is, I think, a lot of concern being expressed by both sides about the outcome of our elections, the safety of our elections, But I would say that is precisely why we should have good bipartisan work on our election bills. I know that Senator Smith is not going to be a member of the Iowa Senate next year, but maybe after the election here in 2022, we'll have a new chairman of the State Government Committee in the Iowa Senate, and maybe there'll be some new opportunities for bipartisan work on this. The thing that really scares me about several of the election bills that we've done in the past, and there have been, I think, some Democrats who voted for some of them in the House. There have not been, I don't think, any Democratic votes for the bills that Senator Smith, who's Senator Robbie Smith's from Scott County, bill he's authored in the Senate, is frankly because he doesn't involve us in any of the conversations about the bills, and we have concerns about how those bills are going to be written. So what I would say is let's find a way that we can work together. So if we're going to be reforming our election system, that we can at least do it in a bipartisan way. Because, Gene, I would say that I think probably one of the most important things, not just in Iowa, but across the country, and by the way, I would say that New York, Delaware, and Vermont should catch up with Iowa in some of those respects. I was shocked when I started working in college for a national nonprofit that worked on voting rights and discovered that same-day voter registration was not in all 50 states. I was literally shocked to discover that, having grown up here in Iowa, I think it was normal. So I think that there should be good bipartisan work there because we all, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, third party, whatever, we all want to have trust in the outcome of our election. And the lack of trust in the outcome of our elections right now is, I think, one of the reasons why polarization and tensions have gotten so high in the United States. But to go back to the very first question, we're all now looking at Russia and Ukraine and seeing what happens when you don't have a lowercase d democratic system, and that should scare all of us. And so I think that we need to figure out how to come together around this. And if we're going to put requirements in place for counties that they need to do this, this, and this, I think that we should make sure that counties have the funding to do that too.
John, I'll agree to you. I have an online question from Dan Heater of Riverside, Iowa. If the Louisa Generating Station plans to convert from firing coal to natural gas, why not support Iowa Ag and convert to firing biodiesel? Anybody?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I'll repeat it. If the Louisa Generating Station plans to convert from firing coal to natural gas, why not support Iowa Ag and convert to firing biodiesel?
Sounds good to me.
I don't know anything about it, sure.
That sounds good, but I'd like to do a little research about that, I don't know.
It's the first time hearing of it.
Who asked that question?
Mr. Dan Heater of Riverside, Iowa.
He's on board of directors of the REC here.
Okay.
Local.
Is Dan watching online?
He
Yeah, he is.
Presumably.
Dan, will you email us with some more information about the question you just asked? That sounds really interesting. I think most of the folks up here anyway have been strong supporters of biodiesel for a long time. It's a great renewable fuel, and if there's a way that we can use it to fire some of these power plants and generate electricity, especially that base load, is really important, right? Because sun's not always shining, wind's not always blowing. If there's a way to do that with renewable fuel that uses Iowa corn, or soybeans, right? Biodiesel, yeah. So, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, the generating station is done basically south end of Muscatine, north end of Wise County. And the unique thing about that is that there's a natural gas pipeline company that has high pressure lines on the south end of Muscatine that runs through the bypass area. They come right in. So to make biodiesel really competitive, you'd have to do some kind of a survey or a look at the cost of running a pipeline from those facilities that are on the south end of Muscatine, from that pipeline company out to the generating station. And they have a very competitive rate for generating stations and high volume of use. I'm not saying I'm not supportive of the biodiesel, of course I am. But just having that pipeline that close to the generating station would be very competitive bid to fuel that. That's the only point I'm making.
Mr. Axel.
Doesn't each county have a sheriff's office? Put the drop box in the sheriff's office.
So we weren't, there's no state mandate. You don't have to have a drop box, it's an option. We permitted counties to have that as an option, so there's no mandate, there's no requirement. And if an auditor wants to work with that, I think that's a great idea.
Well, they both work with the county.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So, I mean, if they want to do it 24-hour security, I would hope that the sheriff's office is secure.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. I just want to remind everybody that before 2020, drop boxes didn't exist. We somehow made it through our elections without them.
Yeah.
The Secretary of State authorized them with emergency authorization, and now they can do it. I think that's a great suggestion.
You can still drop them off.
All right,
You can during business hours at the auditor's office. but
okay,
not-
we.
492,
Okay.
plenty of time.
All right. Okay, the gentleman here, followed by the lady here, followed by the gentleman there. Okay?
I just had a question, are you guys, I know there's a lot of states that are introducing legislation to stop these ESG scores. Are you aware of these ESG scores as environmental, social, and government scores through lending institutions? Leftist organizations are using these to grade us on not whether we have financial ability to pay, but our ESG score, whether we're socially aware, or we're pro-government, or, how's the ESG? Environmentally aware. Do you know, is there legislation started? I know there's 22 to 23 states that are stopping this from allowing institutions to grade us, and not by our financial ability, but by on these scores.
Who's the us in that question? You said grading us. Who's the us?
It'd be like the lending institutions. So there's like a capital investment would grade you on your score, whether they're gonna give you money or not.
You like an individual borrower, or do you mean like an
Individual
company?
borrowers and businesses. I actually looked at buying a tractor, and that dealership was gonna assign me an ESG score. And that's where I'm like, what is this?
So,
As you dig into it, then you find out you would be assigned a score, whether you're socially acceptable. So if I have mean tweets, I'm not gonna get, my score's gonna be low. If I'm not a social activist, my score's low. If I'm not a believe in global warming, my score is gonna be low. That's how they want to judge us. And I'm kinda surprised you're not aware of this.
Are you aware of what the Great Reset is?
John, please.
He's right.
I understand that, but you have the floor, and we can't have people taking away your position, especially since other people have requested.
I just am curious if you're even aware of these scores and that they are happening. And I would like to see legislation passed to stop these things.
I've had a few people that have talked about this and everything, but I'm not on any committees that we've discussed this at all. I don't know if maybe Mark.
I know there's 22 states that already have it. They're passing laws as we speak to stop it.
I'm just gonna point out, we have like 10 minutes left to go in the thing, so
Oh, yeah.
what I'm gonna do is ask the legislators to comment, and we'll then get hopefully the next two people, and after that, I'm gonna have to wrap it up, and go to final remarks.
I'll try to be brief as possible. Yes, sir, I have heard of this, and it concerns me because it is something that they are doing in China and have been doing in China, a very similar thing. So we should, I'm glad you brought it up, and we should be aware of this if it's trying to be implemented in Iowa. That's all.
So I would love, if you have more information to share, I certainly would not support any business discriminating against a consumer. I actually work at a lending institution, and I know that there's interest in being more sustainable and what have you, but I've never heard of anyone trying to develop a score for anybody and discriminating on loans or anything like that, so I would not support that. I do think that businesses should have the opportunity to figure out however they want to evaluate themselves, right? Free enterprise businesses should be able to do that for themselves, but I don't think that they should be able to discriminate against consumers or kind of other business practices shouldn't be influenced by that. I mean, if you're telling me that I could get denied a loan because of my tweets, that's obviously a problem.
I'm not exactly.
Yeah.
And delve into it, please.
Yeah.
And I will delve into it, because you all know my personality. I'm vehemently anti-woke, so I will definitely.
Okay, the lady in the violet sweater?
Yes, you.
Hi, I'm Laura Brandt. I'm the nursing home administrator here in Wilton Retirement Community. Been here for about a year. So, good morning, gentlemen. So I'm just asking for, there was two pieces of legislation that went through the House last week, and they're at the Senate level. There are, excuse me, there's too many numbers. SF 2210 about temporary staffing agencies, making them hold them accountable, being more transparent. Makes our job a little bit harder when we are having to pay nursing home agencies $80 an hour and they're paying their CNAs $20. Also appreciate your support on the SF 522, the elder abuse law, to hold our, put more stringent restrictions and limitations on people in our elder in our community before they get to need to come to me. And then I do have one question. With the HF 2545, with the not holding adverse reaction effects towards our community, is that also going to affect our residents in my nursing home? I have to put pretty strict requirements on any resident that's not vaccinated if I have one positive case in a staff member.
If I understand your question correctly, the bill does put the responsibility on the business who is requiring the vaccination. So yes, they will be liable for injuries to that person.
So you're aware of the COVID vaccine mandate for all healthcare workers that were all our heroes 2 years ago, but now they are being mandated to have a vaccine. CDC, CMS, I know we have to abide by them, but at the end of the day, if I get one positive case in a staff member, any vaccinated resident who has a right to make their own decisions, we have to quarantine them for 14 days until we have no positive cases. That is isolation. That is deteriorating. That is depressing. And they built these county in the state. So I just urge you to try to include something.
Yes, no, thank you. That is a big issue that we tried to deal with, and we've been talking about in the legislature. This last 2 years, we've heard from so many people who wanted to be with their loved ones. And sadly, so many people died alone. And that's not something I'm going to forget about. In fact, people were treated very poorly during these times. So we hope to address, we hope that this kind of helps people be a little more responsible in those environments. When we hear and see pictures of the abuse, of neglect, because they're quarantined, because they don't have the staff to take care of these people, it makes me very upset. This whole 2 years has been emotionally draining to hear from the people
With
about
all
this
due
subject.
respect, Mark, our staff is amazing. They held their hands. We lost 10. And they were their family, and they continue to be their family. So it's not the abuse that my staff is doing to, it's the depression, it's the being alone. It's being regulated by the CDC and the WHO and the CMS that make us put these regulations in effect that we have no choice to go against.
Understand. Thank you.
The gentleman back there, and you're going to be.
Well,
I'm
can we
sorry,
respond to the
I'm sorry,
question?
legislators.
So Laura, first of all, thank you and your staff for everything that you've done over the last 2 years. I mean, I cannot imagine what it has been like for you, for the members of your team. I mean, I must have been hell. And so just thank you for everything that you've gone through. Losing 10 members of your family, with all due respect.
Can I interrupt you for one second? David Kerr has to leave right now for another thing, so I just want to make sure he's not walking out in protest.
Thank you for the discussion. I will take that into consideration here.
Feel free to call me anytime. I'd love to follow up.
I've got more superintendents I can call, want to visit with me. But thank you for today's debate, but the back and forth that we had, and we've got a great bunch of legislators here that will finish up. I've got to go quite a ways to my next forum, so I've got to speed a little, and hopefully the police won't hear me too hard.
Thank you.
On Senate File 2210, I can promise you today I will vote for that bill. What these staff agencies are doing is wrong. It is price gouging. It is hurting people. I'm all for figuring out how we get more dollars into the hands of the folks who are providing these services. We need to do that. But what they're doing to you is totally wrong. And it's not just your facility, Lily, and you know that. This is, of course, across our healthcare system. On the elder abuse, honestly, I know that there must have been some concern about it, because I think it's gotten a lot of strong bipartisan support up to this point, so I hope that we're able to get it over the finish line this year. And I, like, again, I thank you for everything that you've gone through. Obviously, you've been through hell and back, and I hope that I pray we're at the tail end of this thing.
So we are working with several of these groups to look at some CMS exclusion language to ensure those things that you talked about, and I don't think Mark was inferring that your guys' staff was doing this, but we did see pictures of other places that were not nearly as phenomenal as Wilton is. So thank you for what you all did, because you took care of my grandfather. You guys are amazing. Absolutely all for Senate File 2210, and I'm on the subcommittee for the elder abuse bill. It just passed on Wednesday. It's going to pass to committee next week, and I think with some changes on the felony status to make sure there are unintended consequences of financial planning with parents and their children, I think we're finally going to get the elder abuse law done this year.
One last question.
Yes, we have one last question.
My name's Dale Swenson. I grew up on a small farm in Des Moines County. In 1979, I earned a PhD in physical chemistry. I've been in science. That's been my career. I'm going to retire soon, but that's been my career. During my time as a scientist, I've been following what's going on with CO2 emissions and the effects of CO2 emissions. And I understand the science that's behind the reports that have been coming out. There was one that was released Monday, I think it was, talking about what's going to be happening, what is happening, what's going to be happening. And I've always, it's struck me as, I just don't understand why more isn't being done. And finally it occurred to me, maybe it's because regular people don't really understand it themselves. So I guess my question to the panel here is, and to the group as well, is do you understand the direness of our climate situation? We have a very short window of time to be able to mitigate, to have the possibility of mitigating the worst effects of climate change. I love my state, I love my country, I love this world, and we're not leaving it in a better state for our grandchildren. We're leaving them with a really big mess. And if we don't do something soon, I mean like now, it's going to be a disaster.
Dale, what do you say you're currently doing?
I run the diffraction facility in the chemistry department at the university.
Okay, you are much, by the way, we're just coming, you are much smarter than any of us who are up here. What I would tell you is, I agree